8, 1954, Dien Bien Phu, the French fortress in Indochina, fell this day to the Communist Viet Minh. The French must now withdraw from North Vietnam. This marks the first time since the American Revolution that a European colonial power has been overthrown by its former colony. The Viet Minh began their war of liberation in 1946. 8 years later, the former guerrilla fighters have the mighty French army surrounded.
This is Indochina today. No longer is the fighting there a mere skirmish with terrorists, it is war. French paratroops drop into Dien Bien Phu, the very center of the conflict. The situation at this fortress camp clearly indicates how the pattern of the fighting has changed. American planes, guns, and ammunition are helping the French and Vietnam forces. Russian and Chinese weapons are aiding the Viet Minh. Thus, the clash is between East and West, and the prize is no longer just Indochina, but all Southeast Asia.
President Eisenhower warned that if the French were defeated by the Viet Minh, all of Southeast Asia would fall to communism, one after another, like dominoes. Ike supported the French with money and equipment, but had no desire to send American troops to fight, just 1 year after the bloody Korean War.
Now our cameras move into the front line to Phu Li on the Delta, where the war is fiercest. Viet Minh troops have penetrated into the town, but French and Vietnam forces lay a devastating barrage to slow their advance. Thus it is hoped to get the civilian population away to comparative safety. Protected by French troops, civilians begin the trek away from Phu Li. A child leads his pet dog along the dusty road that may lead to freedom if the rebels fail to force a counterattack. No, this is no skirmish. This is war. War at its most bestial, for none are spared its horrors. Death is in the midst of these people. Bewildered by a conflict barely understood, a woman can still smile as she takes the dusty road that may or may not have an ending.
The climax of the war came at Dien Bien Phu. The French commander, General Navarre, attempted to provoke the Viet Minh guerrillas into a full-scale battle, which the French felt certain they would win. To their horror, the French garrison quickly found themselves surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered. After a siege that lasted 55 days, the French general radioed back to Paris that they could no longer hold out. They surrendered. The bitter defeat brought French and Viet Minh forces to the negotiating table in Geneva, while similar talks were held back in Vietnam.
This is the first time that such a meeting has been held in Indochina. A portrait of Ho Chi Minh, the communist leader, hangs above the conference table. He is not present. Instead, one of his aides, General Tien Dung, heads the Red delegation. The position of a truce line presents an immediate problem. The Reds say the 14th parallel, the French the 18th. But in between lies the wealth of the country, rice fields.
On July 21st, 1954, the long and bitter conflict was over for France.
In the green and bronze conference hall at Geneva, the last hours of the Indochina War were played out. Viet Minh delegates agreed the truce with Vietnam and French representatives. The truce document was signed, and the whole world was at peace for the first time for 15 years.
The Geneva Peace Accord ended the war and divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel. The communist Viet Minh controlled the north, the non-communist Vietnamese ruled the south. Despite the peace treaty, the communist north continued to wage a guerrilla war against the south. By 1964, the U.S. found itself in the midst of what would soon be known as the Vietnam War, a war that may never have taken place if the French had been victorious at Dien Bien Phu.